blessed morning to all the administrators, faculty, students of the CEAP member schools and PEAC affiliated institutions all over the Philippines. I'm Miguel Carlo Abadines, currently the Advocacy and Information Management Officer of the CEAP.
And I am Diane Valias, Membership and Communications Officer. We will be your moderators for today. But before we proceed formally with our webinar, let us begin with an opening prayer as we remember that we are in the holy presence of God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, we want to thank you for another wonderful day you have given to us. Be with us today as we learn more about ways we can engage and be active in the upcoming 2022 national and local elections. Be with our speakers as they share their time and knowledge with us and challenge us to do more in these coming elections. Grant them the wisdom of the Holy Spirit, and may your words of consolation, hope, and encouragement be shared through them. Lord, it is a difficult time for many of us, as well as our fellow brothers and sisters who are struggling to make a living. Grant us the grace to have deep compassion for those who are most in need and to respond generously, just like how your Son invited us to live our lives oriented towards our neighbors. For our frontline workers, continue to protect them and keep them safe through this pandemic. We continue to pray for your Holy Spirit to move in our hearts and lead us towards the path you wish for us to take, a path of love, hope, and courage. All this we ask in Jesus' name, amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, thank you, Miss Aya. Good morning once again to everyone. For those who just tuned in with us, we welcome you to the second webinar for the CEAP's 2022 election engagement entitled Tender Love and Citizenship, Ways to be Involved in the 2022 Elections. We are live both on the CEAP Facebook page and the CEAP channel on YouTube. We are also being streamed live on the Facebook pages of CEAP, of the CEAP regional Facebook pages, the PEAC, and Miriam Elect Soon. Feel free to continue sharing this to your fellow teachers, administrators, parents, and relatives, and as well as the students so that they can join in and listen. No? So we would just like to thank again the Private Education Assistance Committee, or PEAC, for giving their support to this webinar. We also have the support of Dr. Lulu Sese, no, President of PAP School, for our event. No, ayan, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And as we have emphasized in our previous webinar, the 2022 national and local elections will be a critical moment for our country because the leaders that we will be electing will be tasked to guide the Philippines in rising from this pandemic. So beyond just voting, we can do more. It is very crucial for crossroads like this that we are collectively being invited to everyday heroism, to be courageous in giving ourselves to ensure that a better Philippines for our family and countrymen will be secured post-elections. To give her thoughts and welcome us formally to this webinar, may I invite Sister Maria Marisa Arviri, RVM, CEAP President, to give her remarks.
To our esteemed resource persons, school administrators, teachers, and our dear students, good morning. I would like to thank everyone present today for attending and get engaged in this webinar entitled Tender Love and Citizenship, Ways to be Involved in 2022 Elections. The COVID pandemic has undoubtedly been a painful and challenging experience for many of us. In the past year or so, we have changed how we do things significantly as we adjusted to new ways of living to ensure that our loved ones remained safe. The education sector was affected considerably. We had to learn how to do things differently. Catholic schools had to adjust quickly to the limitations that the pandemic brought about. In the past year, administrators teachers and students had to struggle together to adapt to the new normal. In this pandemic, we began to see the cracks and broken parts of our nation more clearly. We saw many vulnerable families plunge into poverty and hunger, workers losing their jobs, and the limits of our health system. We have witnessed the inequality that grew deep in our society, economically and politically, especially how privileges have been afforded to those in power. At least in this pandemic, what has been made clear is the importance of having good leaders. In areas where there is poor leadership, we have seen how the nation can suffer. But in places where good leaders lead, we can see how the government can listen and serve the needs of its people. Next year will be a crucial time for all of us. The 2022 national and local elections will be happening in May, and it will be an opportunity to push for the positive change that we desire for the people we care about and our nation. The people we will elect at the national and local levels will play a crucial role in the Philippines from 2022 onwards. Much is at stake for all of us. That is why, as Christians, we must engage. In the same way that Jesus and his disciples were involved in people's everyday problems, it is also our Christian vocation to be involved in politics, to be good citizens and people for each other in our country. Our Christian duty is to be informed, to dialogue, have meaningful conversations, and make sure we have the correct information before casting our votes. The elections is also an opportunity to raise the critical issues that need to be solved and give voice to those who have been silenced. It is by collectively engaging that we can ensure meaningful 2022 elections for all. As we participate in today's webinar, may we reflect and consider ways to be involved in the upcoming elections. What can we do as Christians and engaged citizens to ensure that the love we preach is a love that manifests in actions that uplift the dignity of persons, struggles for justice, and strives for the common good? How do we ensure that the voice of those who are marginalized will be heard in the elections? What can we do so that people will be informed and that candidates will address the most critical issues? To our resource persons, former COMELEC Commissioner Luie Guia, Attorney Caritos of LENTE, and Mr. Cuarteros of De La Salle, Philippines, thank you for working with the Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines, or CEAP, for this webinar. I am sure that with the sharing of your knowledge and experiences, our audience will come out inspired, encouraged, and driven to engage more deeply in the upcoming 2022 national and local elections. To everyone, thank you for being here, and may we have a fruitful discussion ahead. May God bless us all.
Yeah, thank you, Sister Marisa, no, for that wonderful reminder, as well as for continually challenge us to do more. No, I think that's the great invitation for all of us here listening, especially our institutions. What can we do more to also answer, no, our call to be responsible Christian citizens? I guess before we deep dive into our discussion today, warm up muna tayo, no. Let us do a simple poll. So na-discover ko po ang Facebook poll, no, Char. At exciting pala siya, no. It's a way to interact So, okay, check all of your screens ngayon. So, kung nandun po kayo sa Facebook page, check nyo yung screens nyo ngayon dito sa Facebook Live natin and click the poll to participate. Ayan. So, yung first question natin for today, no, is simple. How was your experience of the voters registration process? Ayan. So, sa mga nagparehistro na po, how was your experience of the voters registration process? Was it smooth and easy? Was it a bit of trouble but doable? Or was it difficult and you struggled? Ayan. So, bumoto po tayo para makita po natin. Ayan. Okay. Ano ba yung mga majority experience natin, Miss Aya?
Well, for me personally, it was easy when I registered just last month. So I'm waiting for the other responses if that's the same for them.
Okay, so mag-click lang kayo dyan. Makikita nyo po sa Facebook Live natin. Sumagot po tayo dyan kung kamusta po ang experience natin ng voters registration, no? Ayan. Okay. So nakikita natin ngayon yung results, no? Okay. So sana naman nakapag-rehistro na tayo. Sa mga hindi pa po nakapag-rehistro, pwede po tayo maghanap ng oras, no? Para talagang pwede lumabas at magparehistro, no? Especially mga ibang areas sa atin, mas nag-relax na po, mag-GCQ na po or MGCQ. Please take this opportunity to get yourself registered. All right, sige. So for our second question naman today, no? Are there currently election-related activities happening in your school or institution? Yes or no? Okay? Are there currently election-related activities happening in your school or your institution? Yes or no? Para makita naman natin, meron na bang mga activities, no? So slowly nagwa-warm up na yung mga tao to the elections, no? Parating na po siya in about 9 months, less than 9 months, no? Mag-e-election na po tayo, no? So it will be a critical period. So it'll be good kung may activities na tayo diyan. Majority ba meron or majority wala, no? Majority, yes. Okay, so it's good to hear that many of our viewers right now, no, meron na mga activities. And yung tanong naman natin for today is, what can we do more? Ayan, sige. So warm up lang yun, no? Madami pa tayong opportunities para mag-Facebook poll. So yan, Miss Aya?
Yes, so before we begin the discussion, please allow us to give you some reminders. First, as the talk is ongoing, we encourage you to post your questions or comments at the comment section on Facebook and YouTube. Now, we will ask these questions or read the comments during the Q&A portion. Second, certificates. So we get a lot of queries about e-certificates. So please be informed that you will receive the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. The link will be posted later in the comment section of this video, both on YouTube and Facebook. The link will be up only from 11:20 a.m. until 5 p.m. today. I repeat, that's until 5 p.m. today only. So we encourage you to answer the evaluation form and you will receive your certificate of attendance within 3 to 5 business days. But finally, please be reminded as well that this is a free webinar. Again, we are giving this to you for free. But if you want to pay it forward and continue to support the activities of CEAP, you can send in your donations to the bank account details as seen in your screen right now. You may also show your support by sending us Facebook stars. Lastly, we encourage you to share this webinar with your networks with the hashtags #CEAPcares, #VoteLove, and #LoveIsOurChoice. Okay, Carlo?
Ayan. So vote love. Yan po yung rallying call namin sa CEAP for this coming election. So please share this to your networks, invite your students, invite parents, no, and share with the hashtags vote love and CEAP cares, no. So let's go straight into our discussion. So last Monday, no, we were fortunate enough to have Commissioner Guanzon and Father Buenafe share with us their thoughts on the meaning and power of our vote, no. So they emphasize the need to register and to be involved, especially since this is one of the most important elections of all time. Yung po yung sinasabi ni Commissioner Guanzo, no? Kung di pa kayo bumoboto before and this is the time to vote, it will be this coming election, no? Especially because we are going through so much, no, as a country, and we really need good leaders who will help us out. So I'm sure many of our audience who listened in our last session then were inspired and encouraged, no? Madami po tayong mga estudyante who were very active, no, sa comment section natin, no? So ayan, hopefully we'll have more people join us in our webinar today, no? So to continue our conversation today, no, our first speaker for today is a former commissioner of the Commission on Elections. During his time, he had chaired the committees on indigenous peoples voting, voting by persons deprived of liberty, and persons with disabilities, and was the commissioner in charge of overseas voting at certain periods in his tenure. Presently, he is a lecturer at the College of Law of the De La Salle University and is a consultant on election law, election processes, and reform. Ayan, so isang expert po talaga at binigay ang buhay, no, sa bukasyon on making our elections more meaningful and good for everyone. So let us all welcome Attorney Luie Guia, no? We are truly blessed to have him join us today to enlighten us about what we can do for the vulnerable sectors this coming 2022 elections. Palakpakan naman po natin si Commissioner.
Virtual clap.
Okay, maraming salamat sa generous introduction, Carlo, and thank you so much to everyone. Sister Marisa, Carlo, Aya, Attorney Ona, and Gladstone, magandang umaga sa lahat po ng nandito sa ating event, no? So I was asked to talk about the vulnerable sectors and what we can do for them. But you know, I thought that I might need to start with a concept on how we should look at election. No, I think Carlo, you mentioned that to me, no, to talk about people-centered or voter-centered election. All right. Sige. Okay, elections are by nature people-centered, no? Para saan pa ba election, di ba? Para sa tao. The purpose of election is to carry out and enforce the power of the people to determine how their government is to be constituted. No, for all of us, let me just remind you that we chose to be a democracy. We can choose to have an authoritarian government, but we chose to be a democracy. And having chosen to be a democracy, we have to live with a system where all of us have the responsibility to select and to choose our leaders responsibly. But bottom line is that elections are for the people more than they are for the candidates. Now, why should we even need to emphasize this? Kasi sometimes we lose our focus on what election truly is. Di ba kasi elections to us are fiesta or festive events. We see elections as prize fights that entertain and excite people, no? And sometimes we enjoy the intrigues, the mudslinging, the drama, like we enjoy our primetime television. Saka yung mga sports event that we watch in TV. At di ba kung minsan nag-i-enjoy, oy, may sinabi si ganito, oy, lumipat na sa ibang partido si ganito. And we are entertained by all of this. Media generally reports interesting sound bites like, uy, ayaw ng kapartner nito si ganito. Or parang ang sabi ng iba, uy, tatakbo kaya si ganito, lumipat ng partido. So these are the kinds of news and sound bites that we hear from traditional media as well as in social media. Pero hindi tayo nagtatanong, ano naman kung lumipat si ganito at ganyan o tatakbo si ganito at ganyan sa taong bayan? What is it for them that all these things that are happening among our political elites, anong kwenta niyan sa taong bayan? We don't ask that question. So sometimes we lose the essence of why we're having elections in the first place. Candidates naman, they see elections as mere number contest, no? Yung sino ang maraming boto, forgetting that each and every vote represent individual voters who might have some, concerns that needs to be addressed by their government. Even election managers, no? Kasama ako dito. I used to be with COMELEC. Tend to be drowned by their focus on technical, logistical, and operational necessities of election preparation, for sometimes losing sight of the fact that election generally is about people, about the voters. So why should we emphasize on this? Because I think we have to go back to the paradigm that elections are really for the people. I think there's a need for us to go back to that paradigm. Okay, what is a people or voter-centered election? It is one that sees enjoyment of political and electoral rights as human rights. That it is among the rights that gives dignity to human person. Kagaya nga sinabi yan, ibinahagi ni Sister Marisa sa atin, that electoral rights, in a way, no? Electoral rights is one that gives dignity to a human being. Okay, voter-centered election is one that focuses on the inclusiveness of the electoral process and accessibility of the processes to the voters. Okay, a voter-centered election is one that gives every qualified citizen fair chance to compete in elections, not so much for the candidates, but to give voters real choices. Ngayon, kung ang kaya lang tumakbo sa eleksyon yung may pera o yung may access sa mga ads, no? Makakabili ng mahal na mga political ads. Well, agrabyado yung hindi kayang bumili, pero the bottom line is nabawasan yung choices na meron dapat ang taong bayan. Okay. An election, a voter-centered election, is one that affords sufficient information to all voters so that they can vote with their informed choice. So, kung minsan sinasabi natin, voter-centered election is just about access to voting and registration process. It is also access to information, to electoral information, so that they can have informed choices when they vote. Because what is election for if you deprive people, especially those who are, have difficult access to information or no access to information at all, how can they exercise their right to vote if they would not have any information to guide them? Okay, inclusive elections are actually more meaningful and produce credible and more legitimate results. Now, how do you practice voter-centered election? Well, on voter registration, of course, there has to be access. It has to be convenient to the voters, and voters are accorded safe process. No. Second, there should be as many qualified voters as possible to be covered in the list. No. So hindi lang yan statistical target of a particular number, but we have to make sure that we cover most of the citizens, no, that are qualified to vote. Now, this seems to be very obvious, but why do we need to still say this? Because sometimes napaka theoretical yung tingin natin sa voter registration, no? Pero ang totoo diyan, meron tayong mga kababayan na talagang hindi naaabot, at yung, well, maybe strict sometimes yung deadline natin, strict yung target natin, and we're sometimes satisfied with with an artificially set target, but we cannot it's hard for us to realize that there might be others who would need to be in the list. And sometimes technical and procedural matters, as I've said, no, goes in the way of yung basic purpose of election, which is to ensure the right to political participation of willing voters. Okay, sa candidacies naman, or filing of certificates of candidacies, well, there has to be an environment for qualified but resource-challenged citizens to run for elective office. Why is this voter-centered? Kasi when you afford qualified citizens who are, pero walang pera to run, then you give people better options. May magpagpipilian para ano ang eleksyon kung wala namang pagpipilian. Di ba? Okay, let's okay, and a part of that is to monitor efforts to discourage candidacies through bribery and threats. Siguro narinig nyo na kung minsan in certain localities nag-uusap-usap yung mga politiko at say, wag ka na lang tumakbo at ako na lang ang tatakbo. And then in a research that is done by a group that I belong, no, we seem to have, although anecdotally, noticed that there are more unopposed candidacies lately. So parang ang ibig sabihin nun, anecdotally also, hindi pa namin, we want to test this hypothesis, that nagkakaaregluhan na prior to the filing of certificate of candidacy. No? Well, this might be easy. This might be an election easy to run from the point of view of COMELEC. Siguro walang gulo, yun ang tinitingnan natin. But at the end of the day, para saan yung election kung walang pagpipilian yung tao? So hindi yan voter-centered kung walang kalaban. Okay? Because election is about choosing the right to choose by the people. Okay, campaigns. We can perhaps assist efforts to ensure electoral information reach every voter in the country. As I've said, no, yung kampanya usually kaya lang gawin ng mga may pera. But it is not voter-centered if we have that remain to be so. No? So I think access to information to every voter should be the philosophy or the principle behind any campaign system. All right. And secondly, perhaps there has to be some effort, especially by CSOs or probably schools, to help in formulating governance issue that should define the electoral narrative of every election campaign. In other words, let the people capture the narrative of election campaigns. Hindi yung mga politiko ang pinapakinggan natin, but let's let the politicians and the candidates listen to what the people have to say or what their concerns are. No, this may be a good project for schools and for CSOs. No, and let's not talk about grand national project on this matter. Siguro mas kwan pa nga mas concrete kung local, let's say sa mayor. Ano yung kailangan ng ating bayan, ng ating munisipyo? Dito, di ba? At i-concretize natin yon. At pilitin natin yung mga politiko magdebate doon sa mga issues na yun kaysa piliin nila kung ano yung topic na gusto nilang sabihin sa mga kampanya. It's time for politicians or candidates to listen to what the people have to say than the people merely listening to what politicians have to say during election campaign. On voter education, let's understand the circumstances of voters and retrofit modules to their context rather than proceed with a perspective that assumes that voters do not vote intelligently. Sometimes condescending kasi yung ating nakasanayan na voter education. Hindi nila alam, kaya sasabihin namin sa kanila kung paano. But that is not something that is relevant and meaningful to many of our kababayans. Kaya nagiging abstract yung elections at saka yung concepts ng democracy sa kanila dahil hindi niya tinutugunan yung kondisyon at yung kanilang actual experience on the ground. No, so probably voter educators, quote unquote, need to be educated as well on how they can have conversation. It's more like conversation rather than education, perhaps, with these people and with their with the targets of their so-called quote-unquote voter education for them to be effective on voting and counting. Okay, of course, we should be eternally vigilant to make sure that votes are counted correctly. And we should be guided by the framework of one person, one vote. One person, one vote is simply the essence of electoral of elections, no? Kasi equal suffrage. Ibig sabihin, hindi ang isang tao walang mas mabigat na boto kaysa sa iba. So basically, I think that's very easy to understand. And of course, also, yung process ng voting should be accessible. It should be convenient to the voters. And in our context today, it should be safe for the voters. And of course, if you plan to do legal and policy reform, advocacy, so i-consider natin yung voter-centered election paradigm in proposing return. Now, why do I have to say this? Kasi sometimes, ang tinitingnan natin yung technical difficulty, feasibility operationally of certain reform measures, pero kulang ng lalim eh. Let's always go back to the essence of what election really is all about. No, it is something that is for the voters. Now, let me go. I'm sorry, I might be taking much time, no, but let me go to the issue of the electoral rights of the quote-unquote the vulnerable sector. Now, I was asked to share my experience on this. Well, my experience is not really as robust as perhaps the experience of the next speaker, si Rona Caritos, because I actually learned from them when I started associating with them when I joined Rona in LENTE. No, but also carrying over my learnings from LENTE going towards my government stint in the commission. I was a member of LENTE prior to my joining COMELEC. So, yun ang aking karanasan sa working with the vulnerable sector. But let me give you this background first to understand the efforts and the necessity and the philosophy of doing vulnerable sector work on elections, at least in the context of COMELEC, where I came from, and civil society effort on working with vulnerable sectors. Because the previous dominant paradigm was that it goes something like this, no? Based on the old framework, processes are generally designed based on standards suited for the mainstream, no? So mainstream, ibig sabihin yung average voters. When you do that, you tend to lose sight of the fact that there are voters with special needs or special rights, that deserve special privileges. No? So we lose sight of that. And then all the time we've been very comfortable with that. Both government and civil society alike. Okay, example. Registration are conducted in COMELEC offices. So COMELEC offices, that is what the law literally provides. COMELEC offices means yung nasa city center or town center, which necessarily are far from the remote areas, not friendly to PWDs, not friendly to indigenous peoples who by nature are situated, or their communities are situated in remote areas. Okay? But the default is that they have to go to the town to register. Okay, voting at the schools usually located in barangay centers, which are, well, when you go to the provinces, barangay are as big as towns here in Metro Manila. So yung eskwelahan, malayo din yan eh. And then yung design ng eskwelahan are not really accessible friendly because we do not think about this. We did not think about this before. Okay, yung uniform and in-person process of voter registration and filling up of ballots. Let me share this with you. Our basic election law is still the Omnibus Election Code, passed in 1985. Of course, there was an amendment, and the latest of which was the Automated Election Law Amendment that came in 2007. Pero ang concept pa rin niya, yung uniform and in-person process of voter registration and voting and filling up of ballots. So pareho. So how about the visually impaired? How about the other other citizens who cannot register their choice in the same manner in the same mainstream manner. Okay. Previously, the only quote-unquote reasonable accommodation appearing in the election code is to provide assistors to what is termed as disabled and illiterate. All of this is existing paradigm were discriminatory to the vulnerable sectors, one way or another. Okay, so ano ba yung history, no? In 2008, a coalition called Task Force 2010 was organized. It was led by, surprisingly, perhaps to some of you, COMELEC and the Commission on Human Rights and various sectoral, electoral, and human rights CSO. So dito nag-collaborate yung COMELEC at CHR at mga NGOs para tingnan ang election from the lens of rights. No, hindi na lang siya mere procedural matter or procedural concern or technical concern. Tiningnan mo yung election from the matter or from the perspective of right. Of course, pag tiningnan mo ang election from the perspective of human rights, then you would need, of necessity, to look at the most vulnerable population in terms of being deprived, or vulnerability, meaning being deprived of their right to political participation by reason of their circumstances. And of course, ito yung PWD, elderlies, indigenous people, persons deprived of liberties, migrant workers, first-time voters, internally displaced persons. But across time, now of course, in COMELEC, because this is the experience that I had, what I know is that of course I know this. Ang mga nangyari naman because of effort that I would like to think started from that collaboration among government agencies and COMELEC, and as well as CHR and SCSOs, is that nagkaroon na tayo ng satellite registration. Kung titingnan mo yung batas, sabi niya ang registration dapat sa office ng election officer. No, but because of the need to become more to make the process more accessible, nag-imbento ng concept na may satellite offices temporarily ang COMELEC in the areas where they need to bring the registration process. So na mainstream na to. So now you hear and you can experience satellite registration. No, may konting innovation and creativity at the regulation level on the part of COMELEC naman ito. Second, resolutions of COMELEC came to provide better access to vulnerable sectors. Ito yung mga resolution to have special procedures for IP voting, for PWD voting, and for persons with deprived of liberty voting. And then because of the lobby of both COMELEC, CHR, and civil society organization, nagkaroon ng Republic Act 10366, which formalized the creation of exclusive precincts or polling places for persons with disabilities and older persons. No? Okay. In terms of IP voting, dumadami every election yung tinatawag nating IP community, yung special polling places, saka accessible voting centers. No? Meaning, if you've noticed, in the automated election and to optimize the value of using the counting machine, dapat marami ang bumoboto, no, para hindi masayang yung mga makina. But COMELEC did some exception in certain areas where kahit na less than 150, kung more than 150 yung IP members dun sa community na yon, then a special polling place for them can be created kahit na less than 800 or 500 yung 800 or 1,000 yung registered voter na indigenous people. So yun yung mga accommodation or reasonable accommodation that were made. Of course, there are more jail facilities that have been included in the persons deprived of liberty voting. So maraming detention prisoners. And you know what? What is exciting here is that sometimes the Bureau believe it or not, Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, the one that is in charge in our jail facilities in each municipality, no? Sila pa nga yung excited to remind, sometimes, I was the head of the PDL voting in COMELEC, to remind us na, ano na gagawin natin? Let's start this. No? So, yung ripple effect ng voter-centeredness or focus sa vulnerable sector, ay the prospects are okay. No? And yung sensitivity trainings for election workers in serving voters are mainstream. So, regular feature na sa mga trainings ng mga electoral boards na may bahagi yung sensitivity training. Of course, you may say that, there are still some problems, but I see it looking at the glass half full na pag naging mainstream nato within the organization, then the only way forward, the only direction is that it can move forward and it can improve. Okay, and ito rin is I think this is very important. Yung mainstream na rin, yung collaboration with CSOs and government and COMELEC na dati naman hindi ganon ka-established. Now, every committees on vulnerable sector voting, PWD, indigenous peoples and persons deprived of liberty, merong consultative process yan formally recognized by COMELEC, no? Composed of NGOs that are involved, let's say, in indigenous people, NGOs that are involved in persons with disabilities and detention voting. At CHR, usually nag-uusap-usap yan, which includes NCIP and sometimes BJMP. No? So, and finally, there's a vulnerable sector office within COMELEC. No? The vision there is that it becomes a more permanent office within COMELEC so that it survives commissioners who might be championing the process. So it mainstream na yan. At every time that there's an election, there should be some focus on addressing the electoral concerns of the vulnerable sector office. So what are my learnings from this experience? No? Collaboration between government institutions and CSOs produces good results. Okay? Sorry, nagkamali ako sa sulat. Yung important, wala na dapat. Okay. Election officers in COMELEC, dati, when this was first implemented, ang dating nga, dagdag trabaho lang yan. But now they have become more generally accepting of this quote-unquote additional workload because they see that part of their job is to ensure that more voters should be included in the voters list. That you cannot really have a successful conduct of election if you exclude, if certain voters are excluded, especially if the reason were their circumstances and if policies do not adapt. Okay. The design of the electoral process, including the choice of technology, needs to consider the special circumstances of those from the vulnerable group. Expand the coverage of vulnerable groups and include access to information as one to which they are entitled to. Now, this is what I said earlier. Vulnerability is not just about lack of access or difficult access to the processes. Access to information is something that should also be ensured for our vulnerable sectors. And when we talk about vulnerable sectors, siguro hindi lang yung indigenous peoples, persons with disabilities, the poor, the rural poor, and the urban poor, the peasants, are vulnerable by themselves kasi sila kuminsan ang nagiging victims of voter bribery, of intimidations, threats, and even outright violence for electoral gains by some political elites. So they are also vulnerable in that sense, and therefore there should be some policy that should be adopted to address their vulnerability as well. Okay. All right. So what can be done? I think we should continue engaging in election conversation that puts voters at the center. Be they in formal class environment, now I'm talking about, of course, members of CEAP, or in outreach project. perhaps you can also consider election volunteer work as the focus of civic education activities. And NTS, yung NTSP ba yun? Even if it's just for this current election season. And ito, importante din, I think Sister Marisa mentioned this, yung take the lead in fighting disinformation in your locality. No? Alam nyo, ang universities and educational institutions are the centers of knowledge and learning in communities. So I think it's just but right and proper for it to become the center of truth-telling, to fight disinformation, which we expect to be propagated and during the election season. People need to decide on the basis of truth and correct information. So perhaps, of course, you allow and encourage students to volunteer in civil society initiatives on elections, including registration and go out and vote initiative. So that's all. Magpabakuna at magparehistro. Maraming salamat at nabuhay po kayong lahat. I hope I was able to give something substantive to the event. Salamat!
Ayan. Thank you so much for those wonderful insights, Attorney Guia. No? Grabe, ang dami tayong napaisip. Even the short presentation, parang isang malaking usapan na po yun, no? Kung ano pa po yung mga pwedeng gawin talaga ng mga eskwelahan. No? But I really love the focus on the idea of having a voter-centered elections. No? Kasi madalas talaga, pag kwento din ni Commissioner Guia, no? Parang nagkakaroon tayo, parang nafo-focus tayo masyado sa mga kandidato, parang nakakalimutan natin that elections is at the end of the day, no, about us, no, as voters. And maganda din yung punto na yun, no, kung pinapag-usapan natin yung voter, to make our elections more voter-centered, no, to a certain extent, no, that adds more meaning as well to the experience of the voter. And minsan naiisip ko nga na di-disenfranchise yung mga tao sa mga ganitong political processes kasi nga hindi nakasentro sa kanila, no? And they would wonder, bakit ako nagpa-participate dito? Ano ba talaga yung meaning ng vote na to, no? So, thank you so much po, no, Attorney Guia, for that wonderful, no, presentation and for giving us initial insights. Baka si Miss Aya din, meron ka mga initial thoughts, no, after mo nakinig na kayo.
So my key takeaway from that presentation is that we should take the lead in fighting in disinformation in your locality, because that's what we can only do right now since we're at home. So social media is our main platform. So fighting disinformation is really crucial right now. So very informative po, Attorney. Thank you so much.
Sige. Maybe we can introduce already our second speaker, no? Dito na din si Attorney.
Yeah. So for our second presentation for today, we are very privileged to have Attorney Rona Caritos with us. So Attorney Rona currently serves as the Executive Director of the Legal Network for Truthful Elections. She has been an advocate of elections since her law school days. And today, she continues to spearhead policy and legal reform efforts for the elections. To share with us about what schools can do beyond voters' education and voters' registration, let us all welcome Attorney Caritos. Virtual palakpak po.
Hello, magandang umaga sa lahat ng mga viewers natin on the CEAP Facebook page. Magandang umaga po kay Sister Melissa, magandang umaga kay Carlo, kay Diane, our host this morning. Magandang umaga kay Sir Luie at kay Sir Gladstone as my co-guest for this morning's very important webinar session on how to get more involved in the 2022 elections. So the title of our presentation or of our session or our webinar this morning is Tender Love and Citizens, Ways to be Involved in the 2022 National and Local Elections. And again, I'm Attorney Rona Caritos. You can call me Ona. I am from the Legal Network for Truthful Elections or LENTE. I just want to ask, and tinitingnan ko naman yung Facebook page ng CEAP, what is your usual election engagement? As an individual or for students, what is your usual election engagement? And as a group, yung kapag tinanong kayo, matik yun ang sagot nyo. What is your usual election engagement? It's a question addressed to our teachers, to our school administrators, and to our students. What is your usual election engagement as an individual and as a group? Tignan ko lang yung Facebook page kung ano yung mga sagot. Hindi ko ata kaya gawin yun, but I'll rely on Carlo or Diane or yung tech natin to just message me kung ano ba yung mga sagot ng mga participants natin, viewers, on CEAP's Facebook page as to their usual election engagement as an individual and as a group. May mga sagot na ba dyan? So far, wala pa daw sumasagot. Ikaw na lang, Carlo, Yani, what is your usual election engagement as an individual and as a group? Group usually. Sabi ni Antonio, context, we volunteer as poll watchers. Thank you, Antonio, for that answer. Sabi ni Rose, we engage in discussion, debate, brainstorming. I want to follow up kay Rose. Hey, Rose, ano yung brainstorming? Brainstorming about what and for what? Kung pwede ako mag-follow up kay Rose. Sabi ni Primo, usual election engagement is voters ed, poll watching. From Carmelian, Montessori Parents Orientation. Okay, so usually when I ask this question of what is your usual election engagement, kaya may picture dyan ng motor sa mga nagtataka, bakit kaya may picture ng motor yung presentation record order? Kasi that's an automatic motor vehicle or motor. So, kaya matik. So, usually, when I ask this question, the answer is the people, individuals and groups conduct voters education, voter registration activities, encouraging people to register as voters, and they conduct, they do poll monitoring. So, yun yung usual matik na mga sagot ng mga tao. At syempre, bumoboto. Sabi ni Bobby, as an individual, he exercises his vote or his right to vote. So that's usually the answers. Bumoboto, nagpa-public education, nagkakaroon ng discussion, nag-encourage ng mga tao to register, nagmo-monitor na election. Sa mga tumanda na sa eleksyon, at lalong-lalo na doon sa aspeto ng voters education, na minsan po ba sinasabi niyo to? Or nasasabi niyo yan sa sarili niyo? Sawang-sawa na ako. To our school administrators from the CEAP schools, you always conduct, I would assume you always conduct voters education, public education every electoral cycle since the time immemorial. minsan po ba nasabi niyo na itong sawang-sawa na ako? May sumagot ba na, minsan nasasabi ba nila yan? Carlo, yan sa ating chat sa Facebook ng CEAP. Mayroon ba nakapagsabi na po nito? Lalo na yung mga matatanda or tumagal na sa pagkakandak ng public education. Si Kuya Carlo, sa mga hindi nakakaalam, matagal-tagal na rin kayo magkasama niyan sa trabaho pang eleksyon. Si Sir Luie, tagal na rin kayo magkasama ni Sir Luie sa trabaho ng eleksyon. Yes daw, sabi ni Carlo. Sino yung sumagot niyan? Usually, ang sasagot ng yes sa tanong na to ay yung mga every election nag-voters ed, nag-voter registration activities. Sabi ni Primo, yes, kasi para walang nalamang nangyayari pero patuloy pa rin. Sabi ni Rosemary, yes, sawang-sawa na ako. And my presentation, syempre yun ang pasakalye, no? Ano ba naman ito si Atty. Ona sabihin nyo? Ano ba naman ito si Atty. Ona? Ang tagal ng introduction, ang tagal ng pasakalye. Pero I want to give a shout out to Ma'am Letty. No, never. Elections is always a sign of hope. And lagi ko rin po yung sinasabi, Ma'am Letty, I never lose faith in our elections. But I think it's high time for us to reevaluate and reassess ano ba yung ginagawa natin in elections. Because if we're always doing the same activities or the same output, kumbaga, baka may kailangan tayong baguhin in our approach or in our engagement in our elections. And I want to show to you the electoral cycle. And why do I show you this electoral cycle? Because I want to emphasize that there are key stages to an elections. Lagi kasi always look at it as a one-day event o yung lagi nating tinitignan is yung araw ng pagboto. Most of the time, ganun naman ang approach ng mga tao eh. We look at our elections as a one-day event or an activity na doon lahat papunta. But looking at this electoral cycle, and there are three major stages in an electoral cycle, madaming opportunities or madaming points of engagement. There's pre-voting, voting, and post-voting. And I want to show to you, and I want to actually give you an example of what my group, our partners, our youth partners in 10 different areas all over the Philippines will be doing in the elections this year. Of course, they will engage in the usual voters at public education, monitoring, but their work or their effort is directed towards a more specific activity or a more specific goal, and I will be presenting on that. Pero ang gusto ko lang kung tandaan nyo, kung malilimutan nyo lahat ng sinabi ko, and I'm sorry for my internet connection, ang eleksyon ay hindi lang isang araw na activity. The elections is a cycle, and there are many points for engagement in this cycle. And it's not only during voters' education or election or poll monitoring or election day monitoring na lagi natin ginagawa. Okay. Some pre-electoral activities that you can do and that our partners in the 10 different areas will be doing is, of course, they'll be conducting public education, capacity building, networking, lobbying and advocacy, policy making po. Kahit pre-electoral, ito po ay ginagawa ng Simbahang Lingkod ng Bayan or SLB, we can engage in policy work. Paano po? By getting the agenda or identifying your issue as an electoral agenda. And all of these activities, public education, capacity building, networking, lobbying, and advocacy, it's directed towards, for example, your community's identified issue as an electoral engagement. And in our partner communities, in 10 different areas all over the Philippines, Batangas, Manila, Cagayan de Oro, Marinduque, Cotabato, Lanao del Sur, Ormoc, Iloilo. Ayun pa ako nakalimutan dalawa po. Cagayan de Oro, if I do not repeat it, yung pong 10 areas nila, ang 10 areas na yun, would identify an issue as an electoral agenda. And once they identified their issues as their electoral agenda, at ito po ay ginawa na ng SLB at hindi po ito bago, or ng Simbahang Likod ng Bayan, magkakaroon po sila ng candidates forum with their, in their local areas or in their respective areas. And they will ask each and every local candidate their stance or the stance of the candidate on their identified issue. Other efforts, we want to have a local FOI in our 10 areas. So they'll be pushing our partners in these 10 areas, will be pushing for the passage of a local FOI or yung freedom of information na tinatawag natin. They'll also be doing work on misinformation and disinformation. I think si Yanni talking about this earlier. They'll also be doing work on campaign finance and public budgeting and financing. Bakit importante po itong public budgeting and financing? For those of you who are not yet aware, yung pong Mandanas ruling will be fully implemented next year. Ano pong ibig sabihin ng Mandanas ruling or ano po yung implication na? Ang mga LGUs will have a bigger budget that they can use for their constituents. So dapat po handa yung mga tao at yung mga organizations sa baba when this time comes next year. Kaya po we're preparing already our partners in the 10 areas to be more capacitated on what public budgeting and financing is. And ito po nakuha namin sa Cagayan de Oro. I don't know if some of you are from CDO, but yung CDO po has a very aggressive and empowered, thank you, Carlo, empowered youth organized activities and engagement with the LGU or the local government unit. Para kung ano po nasabi na empowered and aggressive, since 2013 or 2016, the Oro Youth Development Council, it was formed by lobbying and advocacy of the group led by Tonton, and they were also successful in ensuring that the LGU allocated budget for youth-oriented activities and youth-oriented organizations. So, yun po yung pwede natin gawin. Looking at the pre-electoral stage of the election cycle. And on election day, of course, election monitoring will not be out of the window or lagi naman at lagi yan ginagawa. But our election monitoring is always directed. And for this election, just like in previous elections, it's directed towards vulnerable sector voting and electoral fraud, vote buying and vote selling. Hindi lang po general monitoring, but it's a specific election monitoring towards vulnerable sector voting and electoral fraud. Bakit po importante yung directed na monitoring? Because all the data that we'll be getting from the monitoring of our volunteers sa baba, it will be used to push for policy reforms, whether in Congress or in COMELEC or in our Commission on Elections. After post-electoral po, papasok na po dyan yung lobbying and advocacy plus capacity building. Bakit po? It's directed towards the youth agenda identified in the pre-electoral stage of the cycle. The youth agenda plus comes to life. Kasi after elections, maniningil na po tayo dun sa mga nanalong mga kandidato. And our partners, our youth partners in the 10 areas will be lobbying for the passage of an FOI ordinance or the local Freedom of Information Ordinance, and they will also be engaged in public budgeting and financing. So yan po yung mga possible na pwede nyo pang gawin more than the public education, election monitoring, voting. But wait, para hindi sa, kasi ito ang pangit sa internet eh, hindi sabay yung presentation. But wait, there's more. Bakit kaya? Bakit but wait, there's more? What else is happening next year? Meron pa bang mangyayari next year after the May elections? What else is happening next year? To test if ano pa kayo, gising pa kayo. Can you answer in the chat box of the CEAP Facebook page? Ano bang mangyayari next year after the May 2022 elections? Ano pa bang mangyayari? Meron ba makakasagot? What else is happening next year? Siyempre si Carla bawal sumagot, di ba? Tingnan mo naman sa Facebook ng CEAP. What else is happening next year? Probably from Leia and Dal Guevara. Pero kasi si Leia from Miriam to mismo. Di ba? Hi, Leia. What else is happening next year? The December 5 barangay and SK elections. I think all of us are too much focused on the May 2022 elections, na okay naman po at dapat naman talagang focus tayo. But let us not forget about the barangay and SK elections on December 5, 2022. And I think this is a big opportunity, and this is a wide open opportunity for our schools and for our students to engage in. Kasi ito po yung saktong-sakto talaga in the engagement. Kasi more than the national and local elections, at the national elections, masyado pa nga po yung malayo sa atin eh. But our experience for the past 14, 15 months have shown us how important barangay officials are, how important good barangay officials, barangay and SK officials are. So let us not forget about the barangay and SK elections next year. And I challenge, especially the school administrators present in our session this morning. It's hard and it's difficult to engage with the barangay and the SK, but this is the best avenue for us and for our students to engage in. Ito po yung mararamdaman talaga natin na may nangyayari in our effort or may nangyayari in our engagement. And for those who are not yet familiar, baka po kasi meron iba sa inyo na, SK, ano naman mangyayari sa SK? Mga anak naman ng kapitan pa rin yan. Mga trapo yung mga SK. Since 2018, the SK reform law has been implemented. And for us in LENTE, SK is the way. For us to have real change in the country, let's start with SK. Why? Because there's a wide open opportunity for young blood and new blood to engage in politics. Why am I saying this, or bakit ko po sinasabi? Because the SK reform law is the only law in the Philippines which has an anti-dynasty provision. Ibig sabihin po, yung mga nakamiss na natin na anak ni kapitan, anak ni mayor na tumatakbo sa SK, wala na pong ganon because of this anti-dynasty provision. So, there is a space for our students, for senior high school students, mga grade 12. Kasi ang edad po for you to run as an SK official is from 18 to 24. So there is a space for our students to engage in politics. And it starts with the SK. Because of the age expansion, the anti-political dynasty, hindi kailangan may connect kay mayor, hindi kailangan may connect kay kapitan to run in the SK. For the first time, in a long time, ever since we introduced youth political participation in our constitution, ito talaga yung totoo at genuine na youth political participation that we can talk about. The SK also has financial independence. Meron pong allotted na budget from the barangay budget for the youth na nakalagay po sa isang separate na bank account. We also have the local youth development councils, the integrated local youth development councils, na meron na po talagang office na magsusupervise ng mga SK officials and offices natin. And of course, andun po yung mandatory trainings and linggo ng kabataan. So, aside from preparing for the May 2022 national and local elections, I think it's also our duty as the frontliners for the students, for our hope for the future, to prepare as well for the barangay and SK elections on December 5, 2022. And just to share with everyone, I will end with this information. Alam niyo po ba na in more than 100 plus barangays in the Philippines, wala pong SK officials? As in zero. Walang SK chairperson, walang SK kagawad. And we're working in those 100 areas. Kaya po 10 areas yung engagement na sinasabi ko namin sa LENTE because we clustered those 100 plus barangays into 10 areas of engagement. And our dream, and it's our mission, actually hindi po dream, it's our mission that by December 2025, the next SK elections, this 100 plus barangays will have SK officials already. So yung nangyari po noong 2018 na walang tumakbo kahit isa na kabataan ay hindi na po mangyayari because there will be youth-oriented organizations in place in this 100 plus barangays. So that's the end of my presentation. Magandang umaga po ulit sa ating lahat. And thank you to CEAP, Carlo, Yanni, and to Sister Marisa for giving me and LENTE this opportunity to touch base and talk with your students and your school administrators. Maraming pong salamat.
Ayan. Thank you, Attorney Rona, for sharing with us your experiences in the election reform and other efforts that you want the schools to consider as well. So it is very important that we explore what else can we do to help, especially our viewers right now, our students, diba, Carlo? So, you know, it's very nice that they know that it's going to be SK next year and there are ways for them to be engaged more. How about you, Carlo? What are your other insights after... Yeah.
Understandably, no, parang everyone is focused on voters registration, and that's important. And actually, no, baka pwede din clarify to nila Attorney Rona later on. I think you can already register, no, at this period for the SK election. So actually, for example, kung 15 years old po kayo, pwede kayo magparehistro para makasali kayo sa SK elections. Pero maganda yung punto lang din, no, ni raise ni Attorney Rona, no, na at least ine-expand natin yung possibilities, no. Of course, at this pressing moment, no, voters registration becomes our goal, no? Not just voters registration, pero voters reactivation din, no? Mas lalo yung mga taong hindi nakaboto ng matagal, no? This is an opportunity na po talaga i-reactivate. Pero thank you dun kay Attorney Rona, no? Na mas lumawak pa ano yung mga pwede nating gawin. But of course, we still have our third presenter for today to really ground it, no? Ano ba ang pwedeng gawin talaga ng mga eskwelahan, no? So our speaker for today is currently the National Coordinator of the Lasallian Justice and Peace Commission of the De La Salle, Philippines. Before entering the academy, he worked with NGOs doing political research and advocacy work, no? And today he also teaches political science and development studies in DLSU Manila. To share with us school activities in the De La Salle, Philippines system geared towards raising social awareness and empowering students to become engaged citizens during the elections, we want to welcome Mr. Gladstone Cuarteros. Ayan, palakpakan naman po natin. Virtual palakpak po for our third speaker who will give us his insights on what schools can really do this coming elections.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to all our listeners and viewers on the CEAP Facebook page. Thank you also, Sister Marisa, Commissioner Luie, and Attorney Rona, who spoke ahead of me. Also, Carlo and Aya for the very kind introduction on me. Thank you very much. The beauty of being the last speaker, the third speaker, is all major points have been mentioned already. So what I just do is easier, or only garnishing, putting some missing elements. But I'm happy to share with you what are the plans and programs that we are doing and are planning to do in the 16 LaSalle schools in the Philippines through our work at the La Salle Justice and Peace Commission of the De La Salle, Philippines. There are two important contexts why we are doing what we're doing during elections and even beyond elections and the pre-elections. First is, of course, similar with your schools, perhaps, that it is part of our vision mission, that we want to integrate opportunities to engage social and environmental advocacies in the curriculum programs of the De La Salle schools. So in all our schools, we try to have some opportunities for students from elementary until college for them to be more active in the social, political, environmental advocacies. This is something that's not unique to us, but I'm very sure we all share as a part of the CEAP network. The second important context that we need to understand is the democracy that we know now. Well, the Philippine democracy is no longer the democracy that we know before. It's not the same as we know it. There are a number of changes that had happened. First is Philippine democracy is slowly becoming illiberal. Okay, when we say something not necessarily favorable to the administration, then we are being trolled. The worst would be we're threatened. So that kind of freedom of expression, freedom of opinion is also circumscribed. Okay. Second observation is there's a lot of distortion of the concept and values that we used to know. For example, what's the truth? Supposedly truth is, there's only one truth. There's no alternative truth, right? Those kinds of things. Or the concept of human rights. Those concepts and values are being distorted. Also because populism has become more popular. A number of leaders in different countries are very populist. And so it results to backsliding of democracy because we saw or we observe until now authoritarian practices or authoritarian tendencies of leaders. Okay. I would not dare name who that leader is. You already know him so well. So that's the second important context. So that within the De La Salle, Philippines, we thought of undertaking a citizenship education program because as Attorney Rona has noted, time and again, every elections we do voter registration, voter education, but still somehow there's a disconnect between what our values are. There's no unanimity or unison in the kinds of values as reflected by the electoral outcomes. Okay. So of course there are a lot of things that can be a factor to that kind of development. And so we thought of having this program, citizenship education program, that seeks to deepen understanding of LaSallians and community partners of democracy. What is really democracy? And of course, elections is part of that. Second is to mobilize active citizens in the 2022 elections, mobilizing by doing social civic work, as well as by exercising the right to vote. The third objective is to develop active citizenship, not limited during elections. And in also doing this, we would like to partner with like-minded groups, be it in civil society, be it in business sector, or perhaps some elements within the state apparatus. Some government officials are also pushing for changes or reforms in society. And lastly, we want to sustain a reform constituency, okay, that it's not limited during elections. Given this, part of the citizenship education program is the Boto Losaliano Sulong Pilipino. At the school level, this has been already launched in the LSU. At a network level, we're still working on many of the aspects of the things that I'll be sharing to you today. Boto Lasaliano has started in 2010, and we continue to do it every elections. Okay, this is the Lasallian contribution in making sure that we have credible, honest, transparent, and accountable elections. Okay. What do we have there? There are at least 5 sub-components under this project. First is, of course, voter registration, as many of the different groups in the academe, also civil society, are doing right now. We just like LENTE and election 2022 coalition, we are really pushing hard for satellite registrations to happen. But this has been affected by the quarantine restrictions. Once ECQ and MECQ happens, there's an automatic suspension of registration. But at least in USLS in Bacolod, we will be having one in August 27, 2021. Hopefully, it will not be postponed because this is the second date already. Initially, it should have been last April. But because of the surge in areas outside Manila in March, April, May, then it was rescheduled. We also have this idea of one bus to COMELEC. We will organize students, faculty who have not registered yet, or perhaps to change their registration. And we gather them, and then we bring them to the COMELEC office. This is to also attend to the inability to conduct satellite registration in our campuses. Okay. But even this one is also limited by the CHED circular, saying that there should be no sanctioned, school-sanctioned activities. And so we're doing it on in a manner that perhaps some friends are going there together, and then they will register as a group. Okay. Another thing that we have done is to grant official business for staff and approve absences for students, okay, who would want to register on their own. So after printing the electoral forms, the e-forms, and then bring them to the COMELEC office, if they do that, if they're absent in their classes, it will be an approved absence. If they are teachers or staff, then it will be official business. Okay, we have done that in DLSU starting July, and in all other schools will follow. So we want to maximize the last month of registration this September, so we will do that. Okay. Another thing that we do on Boto Lasaliano is coming up with the Lasallian electoral agenda, and that is conditioned by the results of the survey that we are currently undertaking. So we will sum up those results later on and try to look at what are the major electoral issues that Lasallians would think of at this time, and then try to have some focused discussion with them, so that with select group, so that we could further analyze what's the reason behind those issues that were identified. And this is also important because it will also input into our voter education materials that we'll be developing later on. Okay. Another component is the Bayan Nilay. We started this in August 13 during the feast day of Saint Benil, who's a Lasallian brother as well. So it's a 9-month daily prayers for the 2022 elections. Okay. This is led by our Lasallian Partners Council and also our formation offices. Okay. What we did is our contribution here are acts of kindness or service related to the 2022 elections. So after the prayers, those who have participated should have some kind of action so that it will not be just passive. So we gave them a menu of what they could do as an act of kindness or service for themselves and others. Okay, so there's a menu that is provided to them. This prayer is also led by schools. So their core teams in each school, and the 9-month has been divided into the 16 schools. Okay, so that continues, and it is also open for non-Lasallians. We would want that a broader audience, a broader group of prayer warriors would come together for the 2022 national elections. Another thing, of course, is on voter education. But as has been pointed out earlier, one of the criticism against our voter education would be, yeah, it's a little bit of a moral politics, some kind of you vote for this kind of candidates, and then there are a lot of moral values that we would like to espouse. We try to lessen that. We still believe that we should be guided by the values and vision of society. But in terms of how to convey that message, we will tweak it a bit so that it will be hope-based communication. So aside from the regular webinars that we will undertake, we will also come up with short videos that can be posted in YouTube, as well as we will have some TikTok videos. These are only 1 minute to 3 minute videos, so that it will be appropriate for the millennial audience, Gen Z audience who have short attention spans, and who would love to scroll their their smartphones so often and get bored after 2 to 3 minutes. So we try to adapt to that. Another set of activity would be candidates forum, but both at the national level and also at the local level. So these are done during the campaign period, the candidates forum. While the voters education will happen immediately around October, November, December, January, just before the campaign period starts for national offices, national positions. Because another feedback that we got is, when we undertake our voter education during the campaign period, it is misinterpreted as we're trying to promote certain candidates. So to avoid that feedback once again, we will do it prior to the campaign period. Okay. We will also do candidates profiling, and of course that looks at the background of the candidate and their stand on issues, particularly when they're incumbents and seeking re-elections. Okay. This, I think, are areas wherein a number of organizations can come together and share whatever materials that we have. Okay. During election day, we will also undertake, again, election volunteer mobilization. And of course, that's promoting participation in the elections, as well as being volunteers for our civil society friends who are PPCRV and NAMFEL. Okay, in previous elections, we have provided volunteers for both organizations. Although, of course, we know that PPCRV is more active now in terms of its watchdog functions and very active at the present level. Okay, in 2016, for example, we also volunteered with PPCRV in encoding the ERs, the election results for parallel count. Hopefully, they will still be the civil society partner of COMELEC. I just don't know what's the update there. But in 2016, for 2 days, the volunteers in Pope Pius Center were all Lasallians, and we were able to encode 5,000 ERs for 2 days. The volunteers came from our schools in Manila, CSB, of course, and LaSalle Green Hills and LaSalle Dasmariñas, those 2 schools that we have in Cavite. So we pulled together all our volunteers after the election day, and then for 2 days, we volunteered with PPCRV in Popayos, and PPCRV also appreciated what we have contributed to their work. They gave us, I think, a certificate of appreciation for being the group that have encoded the most number of ERs for them. Okay. For post-audit, this is handled by NAMFREL during the last elections. We hope to also to mobilize volunteers for NAMFREL. Okay. Of course, NAMFREL is also very sentimental and historical partner of Salle, having hosted the first center at the Salle Green Hills in the 1986 elections. So it's there's a special affinity in there. What else? We are also continuing our networking and linkaging with the other groups. Election 2022, of course, PPCRV, LENTE with Atty. Rona here, NAMFREL, as well as CEAP. After this presentation, we also have another presentation with the CEAP group by September 17. I think that's a CEAP NCR. So we'll continue to do our work, but the thing that we are trying to share with you is all these plans and programs that we do for the 2022 elections is under a bigger program. That's the Citizenship Education Program. Because at the end of the day, because we love the Philippines, okay, and we hope to develop a critical mass using the jargon of BTS, an army of liberal Democrats, okay, citizens who have deeper and better appreciation of democracy as a system of rule, a system wherein citizens take part in public affairs both directly, like voting, and also indirectly. Also a system wherein it needs the support and voice of the citizens. Thank you very much for listening. Good day.
So Sir Gladstone, thank you for sharing your efforts na ginagawa po ngayon ng De La Salle Philippines. Just based on Sir Gladstone's presentation, parang there's really a menu na pwede talagang i-pursue ng mga schools. And I guess for the administrators, for the teachers who are listening, I think there's a beautiful way to appreciate this. One, at the level of congregations, maybe there is a way for us to coordinate our efforts din, for the coming elections. Maybe there is a system-wide, either as diocesan school systems or congregational school systems, pwede talaga natin explore a menu of options na pwede talaga nating engage. Kasi the elections is more than just voting, just what I think has been emphasized by many of our speakers, madaming pwedeng gawin sa election to make it more meaningful and as an opportunity for people to really participate. Ikaw naman, Miss Aya, ano naman yung mga nakuha din natin sa presentation?
Yes, Carlos. So the citizenship education program that Sir Gladstone presented is very comprehensive talaga. And the information on this session is really something that the schools, the teachers, the faculty that are currently watching right now can take note of. So yes, thank you so much for that, Sir Gladstone. So how about you, Carla? Because after this, we'll just take a short break before resuming to our open forum part of the webinar.
All right. So it's good that we're back, no? Finally, we're gonna be at the question and answer part, no? Our open forum. And so for those who are still watching, please continue to send in your questions and your comments. We'll try to pick them up and of course ask them to our panelists for today. But just to check if everyone's back, maybe we can just do a quick Facebook poll ulit, no? Na-try ulit natin to, no? And our first question for this Facebook poll would be, do you feel like there are enough spaces and opportunities for you to be involved and be engaged in the upcoming 2022 national local elections? So the question is, do you think there's enough opportunity for us to be involved in the elections? Yes or no? No, because this signals to us, are we doing enough? Okay, so please give your answer, send it in, no? Participate. Makikita nyo po dyan yung question and it prompts you to answer yes or no, no? I-click lang natin. Do you feel like there are enough spaces and opportunities for you to be involved and be engaged in the elections? Alright, sino yung panalo natin? Yes. Oh, so people think that there are enough spaces, no? So hindi na pala kailangan tong webinar na joke. No, the question is, ano pa ang pwede pa nating gawin? Sige, for the second question naman, no, for this polls, if you were given the opportunity, no, would you like to be an election volunteer for one? Election watchdogs or organizations like LENTE, NAMFREL, PPCRP, baka yung sa school nyo, or two, to be an election volunteer for candidates or politicians, or three, to be an election volunteer for COMELEC. Ayan. Sige, piliin po natin. Ano ang sa tingin nyo, kung kayo mag-election volunteer kayo, ano yung gusto nyong, saan kayo gusto mag-volunteer? Okay, sige. So ano yung lumalabas na result sa atin pa? Ayan, election pa rin. Yung gusto balikan ng mga tao, no? So mukhang magkakaroon ng mga volunteers ang ating NAMFREL, PPCRP, and of course LENTE is also getting volunteers for the law. So yeah, thank you for answering our polls. It's good to have people back now, no? So again, we're in our question and answer portion of our forum. So we'd like to invite you to give your comments and questions. So go, Ms. Aya.
Yes, and may we also remind everyone that you will be receiving the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. So the link will be posted later in the comment section of this video, both on YouTube and Facebook. And the link will only be up from 11:20 a.m. until 5 p.m. today. So we encourage you to answer the evaluation form and you will receive your certificate of attendance within 3 to 5 business days. So do continue sending us your comments and questions. We can answer them and read them afterwards.
All right. Sige, so we'll be having around 15 to 20 minutes of question and answer, no? So there will be so just send in your questions, and I guess now to invite the panelists, no, to the floor. We'll have this discussion, and for the first question din, no. Alam naman po natin, no, we're in a period of pandemic, no, and there's a lot of uncertainties for people, no. I guess for the three panelists, no, with us today, what do you think would be the greatest challenges this coming elections, no, in our unique environment, in our unique space? Are there repeating questions? Are you leading challenges? And what are maybe some of the new challenges, no, na nakikita nyo, no, for this coming elections, no? Maybe we can have Atty. Guia, Atty. Luie to start off the conversation, no?
Magandang umaga ulit. No, I would want to siguro believe that what Gladstone stated earlier, yung backsliding ng democracy at tiwala sa eleksyon at demokrasya, I think that is the most important thing that we have to address. Even without the pandemic, it's already happening all around the world. Tapos yung pandemic pa made it more critical, no? So I think effort should be exerted on making democracy more meaningful to all people. Kasi mukhang nagkakaroon ng logic ang authoritarian no? Which is really a false narrative demokrasya pa rin ang nagbibigay ng dignidad sa bawat bawat mamamayan, and therefore we have to find ways by which that can come back. Hindi siguro yung parang ibalik yung, but tingnan natin kung paano siya mag-fit sa kontekstong na kung nasaan na tayo ngayon. So preserve democracy. Ako, hindi masyadong grand ang tingin ko sa national election, yung ganon. Pero through local elections, titingnan mo kasi yun yung mararanasan talaga ng taong bayan kung ano yung gobyerno sa kanila. At gawin nating meaningful yung democracy, yung value of us getting to say who gets elected rather than somebody else dictating to us what we should do. So yun yung siguro paigtingin natin. Even at the local level, I think we will go along when we will preserve democracy in our country.
Yan. Thank you, Attorney Guia. Maybe anyone else want to add? Baka si Attorney Honor, si Sir Gladstone, who may want to go ahead. Sir Gladstone, sige. Nakamute po kayo.
Well, for me, I think one of the things would be addressing this problem of misinformation and disinformation. That's why in our Bayan Nilay, one of the act of service or act of kindness is to point out misinformation and disinformation, because with the trolls and the troll farms and all and the partisans, there will be more information that are peddled in the internet, Facebook and other social media platforms that are not necessarily true. And that's one thing that we want to help combat, and we will work with Rappler and other groups as well to help on this. Of course, aside from the new challenges of being safe when you cast your ballots, we're still waiting also on the guidelines from COMELEC on how will the actual elections happen on the election day, and hopefully through Attorney Ona, perhaps their updates on the discussions at the COMELEC level on that aspect.
Baka si Attorney Ona, may bigay na po na sagot din doon, no? And also your thoughts on the question po, no?
Sige, sagutin ko muna yung tanong mo, Carlo. Hindi yung problema ay siguro one of our challenges. Because of the forced migration of people, of candidates, political parties in the online platforms because of COVID and the ongoing pandemic. Ang daming hindi na-address offline. Or parang nawawalis under the bed, under the rug, yung mga offline natin ng mga kapwa Pilipino. So I think it's one of the problems. Parang we're too much focused on online activities. Of course, we can do anything about the pandemic. Siyempre, we can do yung usual face-to-face. But merong nawawala at merong hindi nakaka-connect. At yung mga offline o yung siguro 40 or 40% pa rin ng Filipinos yung offline, or there's no connection to the online platforms, to Facebook or to any of the tools that we're using in the online world. So I think that's one of the problems. Disenfranchisement as to information and disenfranchisement as to voting. So ngayon pa lang magkakaroon na ng disconnect. So that's one of the challenge to us. Paano natin gagawin yun? Paano natin ma-address yung mga offline or yung mga nasa offline pa rin na mundo?
Ayun, sige. Thank you, Attorney. May mga ano ka daw, baka doon naman sa question ni Sir Gladstone, may mga idea ka ba on how? Kasi I think was LENTE monitoring din the Palawan plebiscite. Maybe there are some points there that gives us some light on what elections would look like.
I'm sure tayo na may election next year kasi the Palawan plebiscite is an example that it could be done, na kaya ng COMELEC, kaya nating lahat to have an elections during the pandemic. So, sure yan. And yung nangyari naman sa election, actually yung plebiscite sa Palawan, doon ko unang nakita na kahit sobrang big tayo sa information muna. COMELEC Palawan is focused on doing discussions sa online pages nila, online page nila sa Facebook. Pero nung kausap namin yung mga estudyante, yung mga student orgs sa Palawan, from Palawan State University, sabi nila, hindi naman po nakaka-connect yung mga tao sa Facebook. It's either walang internet, walang gadget, o sobrang bagal ng connection. And ganyan ang mangyayari sa buong Pilipinas rin when it comes to information. So, I think kailangan magsimula doon. Masyado malaki yung focus sa online platforms. Nalilimutan natin yung nasa offline. So, dapat may way pa rin to conduct activities in the offline world. But, of course, dapat safe. So, voting naman, yung nakikita natin ng pagkuha ng temperature, pagkuha ng, pagsagot na health declaration form, nakita namin sa plebiscite yun na ginawa. So, yung nakikita natin, pagpasok ng mga public establishments or private establishments, gagawin din natin yon pagboboto tayo dun sa voting center sa election next week. Ang pakiusap lang namin sa COMELEC, kasi we've been having discussions with medical groups, with doctors, and nagbabago yung science on how we approach or on how we make safe or how we ensure the safety of people. Noong una, uso-uso yung foot bath. Pero the other day, sabi ng mga doctors na kausap namin, hindi na kailangan ng foot bath. Tapos ngayon, I recently read an article na yung mga plastic barriers, hindi na rin siya effective. It's really about air circulation, proper airflow, and yung mga approaches ni COMELEC sa Palawan plebiscite, baka ulitin-ulit nila for the elections next year, baka hindi na siya ganun ka-effective. So, ang pakiusap sa COMELEC is they should adjust their measures according to the science or according to the understanding that we have right now of the pandemic. Kasi narinig namin si COMELEC a few days ago kasi nasa podcast sila. Ang ano pa rin nila, foot bath, plastic barriers, pero hindi na yun yung science to make election safe. So yun.
Thank you so much, no, Attorney Ona. I think there's a lot of insights there, especially in information, especially your emphasis actually on information on the ground, no. I think naman then, based on the experience of the Catholic schools, no, in doing education work, no, this coming elections, no. When I mean during this school year, no, of studies, no, internet connection was a problem, no, and tama nga yung sinasabi niyo, Attorney Ona, no, na the information that is circulating is still focused talaga on online, no. Din po yung nagiging focus natin. So there seems to be a big challenge for us, no, on how to make sure, no, that information can go on the ground. So I think there's a lot of creativity needed for schools there, no? Ms. Aya.
Yes, well, thank you for your answers po, attorneys and Sir Gladstone. Now, we have the second question naman po. So, what are the barriers as to why we cannot shift towards a paradigm that is more voter-centered elections?
O si Com Luie, nakasmile yan.
No, well, you know, it's really a change of paradigms, and paradigm shifts take time, no. But if there's something that the pandemic gave us positively, siguro, is sana it will speed up the change in paradigm in the bureaucracy, meaning COMELEC, and perhaps in how civil society does or do their organizations do their work. So yun lang siguro yung kailangan natin, and we just have to be concerned and be reminded of what elections really are for, constantly being reminded. So siguro engage in conversation, mag-usap tayo. Sabi nga ni Attorney Ona, election is not just an event that happened on a single day. You know, insofar as from the perspective of election management, kami sa COMELEC, the next election starts right after the previous election has been completed. Ganun talaga, and I think that mindset should also be in everyone's siguro at a lesser intensity, of course, no. Pero we have got to change our paradigm on how we see elections, and be reminded always that so ganun siguro para maging voter centered kasi obvious naman na dapat voter centered din. Nakakalimutan lang siguro. At huwag sigurong masyadong maaliw doon sa mga sensational na balita. Lumipat na si ganyan. Uy, running mate ni ganito si ganyan. Ano pakialam ko kung running mate ni ano naman sa tao 'yon? Perhaps we should be asking those questions ourselves when we hear this news.
Thank you, Com Luie. Attorney Rona and Sir Gladstone, baka may ano po kayo, additional insights.
Ako, susugan ko lang yung sinabi ni Sir Luie na hindi lang kandidato yung dapat yung magbago pati the way that organizations like LENTE, like CEAP, does its work in the elections. Kasi okay yung maging komportable sa lagi natin ginagawa. Voters education, public education, candidates forum. The way that we use candidates forum, agad hindi ang focus botante, kundi kandidato. I always go back doon sa ginagawa ng SLB na ang agenda ng mga tao o ng mga sektor ang pinupush forward or pinuput forward. So dapat voters forum siguro yung gawin natin. At hindi siya voters education kasi ako sobrang misnomer at lagi po sinasabi ni Sir Luie na hindi naman kailangan ng edukasyon ng mga botante. Alam na ng mga botante kung sino dapat iboto, ano dapat yung hanapin sa mga kandidato. It's part of public education, understanding the functions of each office or each position. So siguro yun, it's as assessment of how we do our work and not be comfortable in our usual lineup of activities in every election cycle.
Thank you, Attorney. Ikaw naman, Sir Gladstone, para naman may ano din.
One of the things perhaps that academic institutions could contribute is provide research outputs, empirical data on election or local issues that can be discussion for during election campaigns. Yung mga kunyari, pinag-usapan natin, anti-corruption. Ano yung level of corruption dyan sa local level? Dapat yun yung napoprovide ng mga eskwelahan natin. Poverty, napag-uusapan sana natin yun. And the academe, because that's the expectation, is the one that should bring those figures, those evidences out so that it will be a matter of public discussion. Ganun din sana, ayun din yung gagawin natin dapat dito sa national so that we will also guide our media friends na hindi sila dapat nakatutok lang dun sa parang away ng mga dalawang manok o mga di ba? Parang sabong lang, magsasabong yung mga kandidato. So, the challenge for experts in the different fields of development and politics and public administration is to come up with all those studies and share them at this time. Ilabas nyo yan para mapag-usapan natin at makontextualize natin yung mga diskusyon sa politika natin sa panahon ng election. At yun dapat para so that we could reclaim the space at the media and also on so Facebook on the discussions. Kasi ang nagdidikta kasi yung candidate at saka yung media people. So dapat makatulong ang mga academics in providing those. Ang mahalaga lang, dapat yung research natin is also balanced, objective, and it has empirical data to back up the conclusions that we come up with. Kaya yun ang palagay ko, the school should also contribute here, and we will do as much as we can as a share to this public discussions during the elections.
Yeah. Of course, the invitation for us, medyo nakaka-pressure yun kung each individual school, But I think clusters of schools can work together, di ba? To produce the information needed. Mas lalo na sa local po, sa dami din ginawa namin na trabaho din sa elections in the past years, yung nagkukulang talaga tayo sa local information, ang candidates profiles, there will be 10 different versions of Senate profiles, 10 different versions of presidential and vice presidential profiles, but no one does it for the mayor, no one does it for people running in Congress. Wala pong gumagawa nun para sa councilors natin, At magandang challenge po yun ngayon sa mga nakikinig na PEAC schools and CEAP schools, We're everywhere. We're nationwide. Ano ang pwedeng maging papel ng eskwelahan para mag-provide ng ganun na critical na information na hindi lang ipapublish online, pero baka pwedeng i-distribute sa mga communities, baka may mga TARP, mga, di ba, nakalagay din yung mga information para sa mga kandidato. Kasi alam naman natin, the voters know who they would vote for, pero baka nagkaka-struggle lang sila sa information, no? But we have to trust na kaya mag-discern ng mga tao sino ba talaga yung tamang leader nila, no? Well, I guess na medyo parang gusto ko pa mag-usap until mga 12, no? Medyo kailangan natin pero ako siguro I'd like to ask for your, I guess, final comments, no? Maybe isang payo or things that you would invite and challenge the Catholic schools, no, for this coming 2022 elections, no? Baka we can start with Sir Gladstone and we'll end with
Okay.
Atty. No?
Of course, the invitation is first, we make sure that our constituency, our stakeholders, our students, staff will participate in the elections. Second is to provide discussions, dialogue, provide those opportunities for people to discuss issues related to the elections and not necessarily on specific candidates. And third, again, is for the schools to provide those research outputs, those empirical evidence to back up specific advocacies that we would want on improving how we govern, on corruption, on poverty, on the environment, and also on improving processes in government. We need those themes and issues so that we can influence the public discussion. Thank you.
Attorney Ona.
Siguro, para to end po, una-una, maraming salamat po sa CEAP for giving me this opportunity. And to end, I just want to gusto ko lang i-quote si Father Furios kasi syempre kakamatay lang ni Father Furios. Gusto ko lang basahin itong excerpt sa isang reading about, ginawa niya ito eh. Para sa pagbuo niya ng mga abstraction, hindi siya nagpapakomportable sa mga abstraction. Kung iniiwan man niya ang tunay na buhay upang atupagin ang pagmumuni-muni, ginagawa lamang niya ito upang pasukin ng mas malalim, hindi ang abstraction pagkusang tunay na buhay. So ang madali po kasi talaga sa atin na mag-educate about electoral laws, election procedures, electoral issues. Pero yan po ay mga abstraction, sabi nga ni Father Fergus. At the end of the day, kailangan po talaga nating bumaba, makipag-usap sa mga tao kung ano ba talaga ang kanilang issue, ano ba kanilang saloobin sa darating na eleksyon, para po tayo mapapasok sa tunay na buhay o tunay na mundo. So, tandaan po natin yun, huwag maging komportable sa nakagis lang. We should do more and go beyond our comfort zone. So, yun lang po. Salamat, Carlo. Salamat, Yani.
Yan, sige. Guia po.
Siguro ko naman, obvious naman, academic institutions are beacons of knowledge and truth in their respective locality. No? Mahalaga ang national politics at national election. Pero mahalaga din na tingnan natin yung local election kasi ang tingin ko ang dapat nating gawin ngayon is ipahalagaan ang demokrasya and connect the relations between governance and election and democracy. No, yung ramdam talaga ng tao, and that can be done in this election through initiatives at the local level. Having said that, no, gusto ko lang hindi ko ito na kumpleto nung ako'y nasa COMELEC, pero in-encourage ko yung mga ibang local election officers to form parang multi-sectoral task force on let's say vote buying, let's say Baguio, Cagayan de Oro, and ang in-envision naming membership nito, academic institutions, police, and the security agency for the enforcement side, yung academic institution doon sa sinabi ni Gladstone, yung church and maybe religious organization, faith-based organization on mobilization, and CSOs, no? And look at vote buying probably not as something that is demeaning to those who receive voter bribery, but yung mga subject ng voter bribery are victims themselves. No? So, yun yung maganda. I think ito yung specific issue kasi nababanas tayo sa vote buying. Ito siguro yung solusyon. Baka pwede nating susugan. At I assure you, maraming local COMELEC officers that are very willing and open to doing this. Ona would be a witness to that. Medyo hindi ganun ka-perfect at hindi maganda kuminsan ang pananaw natin sa COMELEC. Pero at the local level, there are a lot of decent COMELEC people at mas malaki ang impact if we deal with them. So this is what your academic network can probably do at the local level. Maraming salamat.
And thank you so much, no, Attorney Guia. I think that's a lot of insights for us. I guess the invitation, as we mentioned in this webinar, is to do more. No, again, the elections is not just about election day and the voting. Of course, maybe that's where it peaks. No, but I think there's a lot of invitation for all of us. No, na ano ba ang mga pwede nating gawin? No, how do we make sure this is a voter-centered elections, or how do we push for a more voter-centered elections? No, nakikita natin sa comments ngayon may mga nagsasabi that's a good idea, and maybe that's something we need to start promoting even when we do our civic education sa mga schools natin. No, i-focus natin that the elections is not about the candidates, it's about us. It's about us as the voters, no? At malaking invitation. And I guess the last one is collaboration at the local level. I think the invitation is not for us to do things by ourselves, but in the same way na natutunan natin sa pandemya na kailangan natin ng isa't isa, baka kailangan ganun din yung mentality natin when it comes to doing activities for the elections, na kailangan nating ang isa't isa din, whether as schools, as parish communities, no, as other civil society organizations, pwede tayong magtulungan sa local para maging meaningful, no, at malalim yung engagement ng tao sa democratic process na ito, no. Ayan. So, yun na yung pinaka insights ko talaga for these elections, and I like to thank the speakers, no. Ms. Aya.
Yeah, and another round of applause for our amazing resource persons. Thank you as well to everyone who commented and joined our conversation. But before we officially end, we would like to thank Raxo City, our web host, as well as the Private Education Assistance Committee, PEAC, for giving their support to this webinar.
Yan. So continue to follow our Facebook page for more updates. We'd also like to make an announcement that in just 2 days, this coming Wednesday to Friday, there will be the National Christian Formation Conference happening as well online, no? Will be organized by the CEAP, no? So this coming Wednesday to Friday from August 25 to 27. The Mass will begin on Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. No? So please just follow our Facebook page and also continue to join the activities of the CEAP. So if you have questions, suggestions, just drop us a message on our Viber channel or even in our CEAP Facebook page. No? So on behalf of our President, Sister Marisa Viri, our VM, and the CEAP Board of Trustees, and Mr. Jose Alan Arellano, our Executive Director, this is Miguel Carlo Abadines.
And this is Diane Balius saying thank you and good morning to everyone.
Sa ikaw at ako, natuto sa prinsipyong punyo at serbisyong totoo, kahalin tulad ni Kristo sa buwarang Katoliko. Pagkakaisa sa tulong at gawa, pasasalamat alaala, pagbabago, ang misyon sa mundo. serbisyo